I'd like to welcome everybody to the Vashon Heritage Museum, Museum Talks. In honor of Veterans Day, our presentation tonight is Vashon Veterans, from the Civil War to Afghanistan. A reminder that your microphone is muted for this talk. You'll only see the speakers, not others. If you have a question, please type it into the chat function and we will answer questions at the end of the presentation. I'd like to recognize and thank For Culture for sponsoring this Museum Talk series. I'm Elsa Kronquist, the Executive Director of the Heritage Museum, and as is our tradition, we respectfully recognize and acknowledge the Native people. I'd like to introduce Chris Austin at this time, our Vashon Heritage Museum board member and co-producer of our talk series, to read the land acknowledgement and to also say something about Lucy Durand.
Thank you, Elsa. Yes, this is a photograph recently discovered of Lucy Durand, and she was a member of the Shobops Native people on Vashon. She was born here in 1843, and in 1927, she testified at the Land Claims Tribunal, and that's given us some of our most detailed and complete information that we have on the Shobops way of life here on the island. She died in January 1929, and she's buried in the Vashon Cemetery. But it was an unmarked grave until 2008, when a headstone was placed on her grave in a ceremony that included the Puyallup tribe of Indians and Islanders. So next slide, thank you. We acknowledge and recognize that we are on the ancestral lands and traditional home of the Shobops Coast Salish Native people, the first people of Vashon Island. This land was their home long before Euro-American voyagers and settlers arrived. The Shobops were forcibly removed from these lands and relocated onto neighboring reservations, including Puyallup, Nisqually, Squaxin Island, and Muckleshoot. Vashon Island is their traditional home, and their historical relationship with the land continues today. We honor the island itself and its Shobops people, past and present.
Now the Vashon Heritage Museum Inclusion Pledge. The Vashon Maury Island Heritage Museum rejects racism, discrimination, and hate. Our purpose is to honor stories of love, oppression, action, and resilience. Stories that give voice to all, examine hard questions about social, economic, and environmental justice, and reveal racism and oppression within our heritage. We pledge that everything we do honor the island's diversity of cultures and histories. In December, we'll be taking a break from the museum talks, but we would like to invite you, if you're a member of the museum, to join us for our annual meeting the first Tuesday of December on Zoom. And we'll be back with a series of new talks for 2022, starting on the second Thursday night in January. And don't forget to visit us at the museum Wednesday through Sunday, 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, to tour our new exhibit in partnership with the Vashon Nature Center, Natural Wonder and Islands Shaped by Water. And now I'd like to introduce tonight's presenters and the presentation. First, I'd like to start with Bruce Haulman, is the current president of the Vashon Heritage Museum and historian, a past board member of the Friends of Mukai and voice of Vashon, the author of the photo history, Vashon Maury Island, and the narrative history, a brief history of Vashon Island. Mike Mattingly has called Vashon Island home since 1988. He has raised 2 sons on the island and been active in coaching. He serves as the commander of Veterans of Foreign Wars 2826 and the Vashon American Legion Benjamin F. Wilson Post 159, and the director of Vashon Veterans Retreat Center. Tonight's presentation, Vashon veterans have served in every American war from the Civil War to the Afghanistan War. Bruce Haulman and Mike Mattingly will recognize the hundreds of Vashon veterans and those who made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. Mike Mattingly will discuss the organization's representing Vashon Veterans and the Vashon Veterans Retreat Center's Haywire House. Welcome, Bruce and Mike. Bruce, would you please start the presentation?
Great. Thank you, Elsa. Of course, during the Civil War, none of the veterans of the Civil War were born on Vashon. They all came here as settlers after the war. And there were about 25 Civil War veterans. This is the H.G. Sickles Post 57 number 10 Grand Army of the Republic, which is the organization of veterans, Union veterans of the Civil War. Vashon became sort of a haven for Civil War veterans. Interesting, at the frontier at the time was basically a fairly cash-poor economy. It wasn't a lot of cash available, but Civil War veterans had cash in the form of veterans benefits. So the frontier became a popular place for many veterans to sort of build their fortunes and to start new lives. And this is a picture of the Sickles Post of the GAR. There was also a women's auxiliary, and there was also a Sons of Civil War Veterans post here on the island. Out of all of those veterans, and as near as we can determine, there were about 20 to 25 Civil War veterans on the island. Only one was a Confederate veteran, and that was A.H. Kingsbury Beach, named after him. And he seemed to have been fairly well accepted by his Union opponents after the war. And he became an important part of Vashon culture in the late 19th century. But the Civil War veterans maintained that sort of pride and service to the American Republic. In the Spanish-American War, we don't have very many records about Spanish war veterans. We do have a couple newspaper articles recognizing them at various times. And as near as we can determine, there were these 5 veterans of the Spanish-American War. Again, I don't believe any of them were born on Vashon, but they all settled on Vashon and maintained the pride in their service in the Spanish-American War. During World War I, you see a real change. Vashon had grown from 700-800 people in the 1890s to, by 1920, almost 2,500 people. So there was a rapid growth in the 1890s and 1920s, and a growth of families. And of course, when World War I started in Europe in 1914, America entered the war in 1917. What you got was a number of Vashon Islanders signing up for the war. And what you see here is a roll of honor that was published in February of 1919, recognizing all the veterans from World War I. And there were 44 in this list. And what's interesting about this list, you probably can't read it very well, but it lists where they served or what branch of service they were in. So you have physicians and surgeons, you have a medical corps, you have engineers, you have aviation corps, Navy, one served on the battleship Maine. So just an interesting sort of mix of military service. During the war, as far as we can determine, only one Vashon veteran was killed in the war, and that was Howard Guerin, who was killed August 17th, 1918. So just about a month before the war ended. And all the records say is somewhere in France. No indication of which particular engagement that he was involved with. But then again, record keeping and those things have changed dramatically in terms of veterans. These are the only 2 photographs I've been able to find of World War I veterans from Vashon. George Bucknell looking very sharp in his Army uniform with his campaign hat, and then Ralph Steen from the Steen family in the US Navy. World War II, very different sort of picture. This is the roll of honor that was put together by the Veterans Association after the war. And this actually lists, I can't read the number, 490 something veterans of World War II on the island. And what's interesting about this roll of honor is it lists the women who served in the WACs, in the waves, and as nurse in the nurse corps in a variety of ways, as well as recognizing the other branches of service. So there was a significant number of Vashon veterans during the war, during World War II. Now, thanks to Mike Mattingly and his research with the 2020 census, today we have one World War II veteran still alive on Vashon Island. Out of all those who served in World War I, we have 13 who died from the island. Harold Agron Park named after him, the Backus brothers, and they were killed within about a 3-month period of each other. Very devastating for the island. And you can see the other names. One of the things that we've been trying to do, and I worked with Kevin Linnell at Ace Hardware before Kevin died earlier this year. One of the things we've been trying to do is collect photographs of all the veterans of Vashon Island. So if all of those who we don't have pictures for, if anyone out there has a photograph of Russell or Robert Marshall, John McKinsky, or Robert McQuaid, please let us know. We'd like to fill this out and recognize those veterans who made the ultimate sacrifice during World War II. It's important to recognize the Japanese Americans from the island who served in World War II. And all of these veterans basically enlisted out of the camps. So they were exiled and imprisoned from the island in 1942. May 16th, 1942, and despite being treated as prisoners in their own country, they still signed up and served. Nora Hoshi, Mary Matsuda in the Nurse Corps. Most of the others served either in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, one of the most highly decorated units in American history, or in the Intelligence Corps as interpreters and as code breakers for the Japanese code. So you have out of a group of about 130 Japanese on the island who were exiled and imprisoned, you have these folks who signed up to serve from the camps. So worth recognizing that. The Korean War, as Mike told me, we have 52 veterans living on the island of the Korean War. But one of the most significant for Vashon is our only Medal of Honor winner, Benjamin Wilson, and the VFW post, or is it American Legion post, is named after him. And this is a photograph of Benjamin Wilson and his son receiving his Medal of Honor from President Dwight D. Eisenhower. So very significant for Vashon. Yeah, Mike? Did you have something to add here?
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mike. Yeah, so just recognize that we have a Medal of Honor winner from Vashon Island, and that's something for us to be quite proud of. This is a fascinating photo to me. This was taken in 1965 at the Burton Post Office. And the JCs had organized an effort to send every Vashon veteran serving in Vietnam a Christmas package. And so this is the post office, all of these packages being sent to servicemen in Vietnam in 1965. And so you can see it, as the war began, the Vietnam War began, Vashon, like many small rural communities across the nation, there was quite a bit of support for the Vietnam War. As the war drug on and as you began to see the young men returning in body bags, attitudes began to shift. Not that Vashon was anti-war by any means, but at the same time, you can see this is the Vashon 12. It was a significant impact on a small rural town to lose this many veterans. And this is a pretty high percentage of veterans killed during the Vietnam War for a community the size of Vashon Island. And so if you have a chance, go into Ober Park. There is a set of obelisks, basalt obelisk in Ober Park, and it recognizes these 12 Vietnam veterans who gave their lives during the war. The war since Vietnam, and of the Vietnam War, there are currently 297 Vietnam War veterans living on Vashon Island. So it's the largest single veteran community on the island. The wars after Vietnam, particularly the Gulf War, the first Gulf War in the 1990s, there were 134 veterans. And of the Gulf War II, the post 9/11 wars in the Middle East and Afghanistan, 14 served. And during that war, of course, we lost First Lieutenant Robert Benison in 2010 in Afghanistan. And that was quite a shock for the community, I think. Robert was well-known, well-liked, very active in high school sports on the island, and quite a loss for the community. So that sort of gives you a quick overview of veterans on Vashon Island. And let me turn it back to Elsa. And Elsa, if you want to introduce Mike, then Mike can give you a sense of what is going on today on the island with veterans. So thank you.
Let's see, can you hear me? Okay. Mike Mattingly, welcome. And Mike serves as the commander of Veterans of Foreign Wars 2826 and a Vashon American Legion Benjamin F. Williams Post 159 and the director of Vashon Veterans Retreat Center. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Elsa. Thank you for having me here today. It's a wonderful day, Veterans Day, and I want to say God bless all the veterans and all the servicemen that are serving today. On the island, we have two veteran service organizations, both chartered by the United States Congress, Veterans of Foreign War, Post 2826, and the American Legion, Post 159. The difference in the organizations is basically a membership requirement. VFW requires a campaign service medal on the discharge papers that you get when you get out, which is Form DD-214. The American Legion had the laws changed by Congress in 2019, so they can now accept anyone that has a DD-214 and stating they served since 1941, December 7th. President Trump signed a bill that was passed by the Congress that allowed them to backdate the membership and wipe out all the rest of the restrictions that had therefore been before for joining the American Legion. Both of them require honorable discharges, even though there are mechanisms if you don't have an honorable discharge that you can join them. The difference in the posts is not much. Both posts are service oriented. Both use poppy sales for revenue. Both are national, state, and local organizations. Both have dues and meet on a monthly basis. And both have service officers that file disability claims with the VA for their benefits. On the island, the VFW specifically does a job of sponsoring the Boy Scouts as one of their missions. The other mission is they have an essay contest called Voice of Democracy for all students in the schools, and that's an annual contest in the fall. The American Legion differs. They sponsor a legislative training session and state government training session, week-long retreat up on Camino Island. And each sponsor can sponsor students to go to those events and pay half of the fees. And they learn how to become a legislator and all about being a legislator in the state of Washington, all the way from forming campaigns, getting elected to office, filling the offices, writing bills and carrying out all the jobs of every government leader all the way up to the governor's office. They also sponsor a flag retirement ceremony. Retirement of the flags is necessary according to the charters of both the VFW and the American Legion. It's held out at the cemetery along with help from the Boy Scouts, and we service all of Seattle 2 district, which is from Northgate down to West Seattle and including Vashon. And the procedure is that we go out and take the flags. The cotton flags are burned, and we use those to put the ashes in the casket. The nylon flags are, because they cannot be burned because of pollution, they go into the liner in the cemetery, and they are laid in there and then covered over until the next time. If there's room, we continue to do it. This is an annual event, sometimes a year and a half. It depends upon how long it takes to collect enough flags to fill up a liner for a casket. Both posts are members of the Vashon Veterans Retreat Center. It was formed to coordinate and really activate people and get in from the veterans community to get involved. You have to be a member of the VFW or the American Legion to be a member. And our activities really started with a property management task of taking the house that is named Lieutenant Haywire House and setting a plan together to remodel that. We also have a headquarters building and offices up there with a hobby shop and a rec room, a small kitchen, an activity room, a workout room, computer access. And this is where we do our service officer claims. We do counseling up there, and we also coordinate our community projects from the old Granny's building at the Nike site. Our first project, speaking community projects, our first and biggest annual project is the Memorial Day service at the cemetery, the end of May. It's an event that honors our fallen. With help from the Boy Scout troops, Troop 294, we distribute 648 flags, that's this year's count, identifying veterans at the cemetery. We form teams of 4 people and go out and put little small flags on each headstone and by the crypts to identify them, so that when we have our service on Memorial Day, they can be identified. You can see this picture on the left that looks kind of blank is a picture of where the little flags are posted. We have our color guard presenting the colors at the Memorial Day service, and I'm administering the program. The flags are important to the American Legion and the VFW. We do have a couple other projects that include flags. Our second project that we do on the island that interfaces with Memorial Day is putting up flags around town. 13 times a year, we put up flags, 148 to 160, depending upon how many have subscribed around the island. They go up in the morning, early morning, and they come down in the afternoon. And during the Memorial Day service, it goes like this. Saturday morning, we put up the flags at the cemetery. That's about a 3-4 hour project. On Memorial Day, we have the service at 11, but we have put flags up at 7 in the morning around town, had breakfast, and then we go out to the cemetery for the Memorial Day service. The afternoon, we take down the flags with the Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts, and that's a couple hours to take them down. And then we return to town and take down the flags that we posted uptown. So we do a flag thing, and of course, unfortunately, today's a good example. We can only do it when it doesn't rain because it's too big a task for us. We don't have the wherewithal, except for going to the old nursing home, to dry out 148 flags when they get rained on. We can't count on the wind drying them most of the time, but once in a while we get lucky if they do get wet. We also get into this flag retirement thing with the American Legion from the 2nd District in Seattle. We're following the protocols, as I said earlier, and putting them in the caskets at the cemetery. We also put a flag on that casket when we do our flags at the Memorial Day service. We have one more project that we took on this year to help in the flag realm. These are pictures of the flag retirement ceremony. You can see the cotton ones going in the burn barrel, and they're folding the flags on the other side over here and delivering them to the caskets. We took on a project of helping the high school get a flagpole for their athletic field. After chasing K2 for about 2 or 3 years to try and find out who owned it and how we could talk to somebody about getting something done up there because it was vacant. We got lucky when Brad Midling and Rob Brothers bought K2. We approached them. The significance of the flagpole is that it was donated by the Mayer brothers from the Olympics down in Salt Lake City. K2 sponsored and made the skis that these Olympic champions skied on. And to show their gratitude, they gave the flagpole, transported it up from Salt Lake City and planted it at K2. When K2 closed, we wanted to try and move it down to the high school. We had a great opportunity this year when they rebuilt the athletic field. Brad graciously gave us the flagpole, saying that we could take it down, but we could have it if we took it down and replace it with one for him. And so we said we would do that. We then coordinated with the high school. And as you can see, what's going on here, we've got a forklift way up in the air, putting the strap on it so we can start separating it. It came off in sections, as you can see in the middle and on the end. We arranged with the athletic director, Andy Sears, to have the boys come up from the football team and transport the flag down the side of the highway to the football stadium, and then give it to the contractor so they could put it in the ground. And they did. We donated an American flag and a POW MIA flag for them to fly while they were, after they got the
Mike, you muted yourself. Hey, Mike. Yep.
I tried to unmute it and it didn't do it. Let's see, where was I? They finishing the flags. They planted the pole in the ground at the high school stadium, and they had it for grand opening, and now they have a light on it, and I think they fly it all year round. Our next project from the Vashon Veterans Retreat Center is probably our main project. It's the Lieutenant Haywire house. We chose this house because of Robert's involvement in the community, and the reason that it's named Lieutenant Haywire's house is that Robert was, when he was a young man, was left-handed and loved to wrestle. And when he was wrestling at a young age, he was somewhat unconventional. He did his moves from the left side instead of the right side, and it really confused people, but he was very, very good. And eventually became a high school state champion. We had the approval of Scott and Tracy to try and get this house renovated. So that's what we're working on today. And we want to provide a transition house for vets and first responders, as Robert was both. He was in the fire department cadet program when he was in high school. We have an ongoing and major remodel of this house that was going to get demoed when we acquired it. We've contributed over $200,000 so far for the project, plus about the same amount of money in labor, volunteer labor, in our efforts. We have sealed the house. We've put siding on the house. As you can see here on the left, there's one of the planks that we were installing is signed by the people that were working that day. We put that in the house for posterity. We've rebuilt the wall in the back of the house. And as you can see, we had to take the whole back off. It was rotten. There had been a porch on the back of the house at one time, and it had leaked down the wall, and over years had taken the wall and turned it to pulp. This house was moved on the island by barge from the old airport, SeaTac airport area, and was used by Sunrise Ridge for some time, both as a place to stay for people at the clinic and for some housing, and at one time they had it rented out. When we acquired the house, it was in a sad state of repair. As you might be able to see in the middle picture, the basement it's still got all the 2x4s in it that were flooded in the basement when we acquired it. We've put a new roof on it. We fixed the cracks in the walls, and and are still working on it. We've provided the electrical and we've put all new plumbing in it. And we removed the trees from around the side of the house that were leaning on the house and really ready to fall on the house, as a matter of fact. We still have to finish remodeling the upstairs. It's down to the studs and we're ready to put insulation in and then drywall it. Then we need to furnish the inside of the house, and then we're going to finish the basement. Our program at this point is to plan on the basement being done by spring, and then we'll attack the upstairs after that. But we look forward to using it as a transition house and a space for vets when they get out of the hospital or they get out of rehab or whatever, or family falls on hard times, they can have someplace to go for temporary housing. We've been unable to really secure permanent housing for vets, and we have a list of about 5 or 6 on the island that really are looking for housing. So if anybody knows of anything available, they could please contact me. We have other projects that we do, but our most important other project that we've done to date is helping the women with the American Hero Quilts. Sue Nebeker has a wonderful program going here. She and these ladies sew these quilts and they're delivered to Fort Lewis, and we've helped them deliver them and take them out to the barracks, and they give them to the military, and they go to the battlefield. And when a person is injured on the battlefield, when they come into their bunk in the hospital and in their barracks, they get this quilt and it's on their bed for them. So as they recuperate, they have a quilt to help keep them safe. So that's kind of what we're doing here on the island. We try real hard to get involved in things for the community and help vets, and it's a lot of fun getting guys together and having them come up here to the retreat. And one of our goals is to have the older veterans, of which Bruce told you the numbers. I think it's 297 Vietnam vets, and there's 140 some younger Gulf vets, and 14 from the second Gulf era. But we get them together and work on projects, making fishing poles and fixing other things that they have. Anything that they have as a project, they can come up and get somebody to work with and enjoy the camaraderie. So that's about what we do. We try hard to keep busy and give back to the community. Thank you for having us here today.
So this would be the time. Thank you very much, Mike and
You're welcome.
Bruce. This would be the time for questions, and we don't have any in our chat at this moment. So if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat.
Well, I just wanted to thank Mike for, letting folks know what the veterans groups on the island are doing. And it's one of those kinds of quiet services. You don't blow your own horn very often. And I know all of us appreciate, the flags going up every holiday, the Memorial Day service. It's become a tradition for many people on the island. The kinds of things that you're doing, and then the Haywire House. We all read about the issues with veterans and PTSD and Veterans Affairs and dealing with the VA, and having an organization on the island that does that and helps veterans deal with the paperwork and deal with the bureaucracy. It's just essential to us being a vibrant community. And so we all appreciate what you do, Mike.
Well, thank you, Bruce, very much. We try hard and we're going to keep trying. We would love to have more members. It's kind of like most organizations these days. The involvement with individual organizations is down all over the country, whether it be in the fraternal organizations or patriotic organizations. And we see it at our district levels and our national levels. In the state of Washington, we have about 25,000 members of the American Legion around the state of Washington. And there's about 30,000 in the VFW. So that's pretty small numbers for a state as large as we are, but that's what it is.
So Mike, there are some questions here. And Bruce.
Okay.
So is there any information regarding the Maury Cemetery with soldiers?
There is not that we have. The way we work with the cemetery district is that that they give us a list of the veterans or the veterans that have died over the year. And we add that to the maps that we have of the different sections up at the main cemetery, at the King County Cemetery. And we don't have really any involvement on the Maury Island Cemetery, nor do we have any maps identifying who is there. We'd certainly be willing to incorporate it into our program if we could get to wherever the maps are and who's buried there.
Sure, yeah, and maybe we can help you with that. The Heritage Association has been working with the Cemetery District and with, there's a statewide organization that sort of helps to identify all the graves and all the cemeteries in Washington State. And so, Mike, maybe you and I can get together with Mike Suddeth, who has been doing some of that work, and Cyrus Anderson, and put our heads together and go through the list of everyone buried in the Maury Island Cemetery and see if any are on the veterans list. I think
That would be great.
that'd be an appropriate thing to do.
Is that tied in at all with the King County Cemetery over on Cemetery Road or not?
My understanding is that the Cemetery District on Vashon has responsibility for the Maury Cemetery, but it was not originally part of the original Vashon Cemetery. So,
Well, maybe we should include Lisa in those
yeah,
conversations.
definitely. Yeah, definitely.
And the next question is, where is the Haywire house located?
Right at the bottom of the road, turning into the Nike site to Sunrise Ridge. It's on the right. It's now painted blue and a couple colors of blue after our new siding was put on that was yellow. Then the complex at Sunrise Ridge decided they were going to paint the buildings all the same colors. So they repainted it this summer and it looks wonderful. So it's right on the highway, on the corner of 210th and the main highway.
On your next question, do we know the names of the Civil War vet in the GAR photo? My great-grandfather, Caleb Barton, is reported to be in that photo.
Yes, I think at the museum, we've got a record of as many people, as many as we could identify in that photograph. So yeah, if that person wants to contact me or contact the museum, Laurie Tucker, we can dig that record out and identify as many of those. They're not, I don't believe they're all identified last time I looked at it, but I think we've identified quite a few. So yes, and Caleb Barton is certainly in that photograph.
Karen Bargelt says, thanks for all of your work for vets and the community. My granddad was active in the VFW, World War II and Korea, and committed to helping veterans and serving the community. It's nice to be reminded of all you do.
Thank you.
And that is all the questions that we have tonight. Was there anything you wanted to add?
No, again, let me just thank Mike for being part of this and for all the service that he and the veterans provide for the island. And we just, at the museum, we were looking for a way to recognize Veterans Day and to help celebrate Veterans Day. And we thought, because our second Thursday talks in November of this year fell on the 11th, we thought it would be very appropriate to honor the veterans. And to recognize that veterans have been on Vashon since the very first American settlement of the island in the 1870s and 1880s. And many of those veterans were early settlers. And of course, as the island grew, the island sent young men to fight in all of the American wars. So, so Mike, we thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I think that there's a heritage for having a facility here on the island too. The old VFW hall down on the main highway.
Mm-hmm.
It was built by veterans in 1952 here on the island. And they formed a separate corporation to put the building in it. And when they decided to sell it, that was before I was involved in the VFW, they had quite a little tussle about who was going to get the revenue from the building, whether it be the state VFW or the locals. And because of their foresight in forming a separate corporation, they were able to separate the money out.
Hmm.
And that's the money that we use to lease this facility at Sunrise Ridge. We have a 12-year lease, and we're going in for more renewal talks. And next year is when in the contract it states that we're going to start discussing it. So we'd like to be here for a long time, and we think it's pretty fitting being up here and having a second facility at an old military base.
Great, great. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
But here's one more question. Speaking of Veterans Day, did Vashon ever have a parade on Veterans Day?
Not that I know of. There's a number of parades around the country, you know, in smaller communities. Auburn, Washington had a parade last weekend, and they have an annual Veterans Day parade, and it's the largest this side of the Mississippi. It pulls people in from all over Pierce and King County, and they have a parade that lasts for 5 or 6 hours to the middle of town, and they have pancake breakfasts and all kinds of things that go along with it. Bremerton has one in the summertime for Memorial Day, and they have one for the 4th of July, but those are the only ones I know of.
Right. Yeah, I don't know historically. Of course, 1921, 100 years ago, this year is when that Veterans Memorial was installed. The obelisk was installed in Vashon Cemetery. And of course, at the time, it was for Civil War, Spanish-American War, and World War I veterans in 1921. And then, of course, it's been expanded, and there are now plaques for all of the American wars that have occurred since 1921. And on Veterans Day and Memorial Day, most specifically on Memorial Day, there's always a ceremony. But for a number of years in the past, Vashon has also celebrated Veterans Day at the cemetery, at that obelisk Veterans Monument there.
Well,
But
no parade.
Yeah, but I'm not aware of ever a parade. I've never read anything about a parade on Vashon, but certainly a recognition of the importance of veterans on the island.
I always appreciate seeing the veterans and the colors as they march down the street at Strawberry Festival at the parade there.
Yes, you know, we've had a problem with that from time to time, both with the people carrying the flags and with the people on the sides throwing the flags back at us that we handed out to give away to the kids. And it's been happening in a number of communities. In Seattle, they still have a lot of community parades, and the VFW and the American Legion get involved in those and usually pass out small flags to children.
Well, that's the end of our questions. And I want to say thank you to you, Mike, and thank you, Bruce, for the presentation this evening. And thank you to everyone who joined us. And happy Veterans Day. And we'll say goodnight.